It's more about a hype cycle rather than a bubble is how I think of it, and that we see a lot of potential. Now we need to go out and realize that potential. I think it's when it stops being talking about doing AI, about AI coming, to it just being there every day. Unless we push those boundaries and really understand what it's doing to people, we can't really navigate the change.
Welcome to the Insight in 15. I'm Krishna Grenville-Goebel, and today I'm joined by Megan Butler, AI Workforce Lead at KPMG. We're going to be delving into the AI bubble and also how leaders can implement AI. We've got 15 minutes. It's a huge topic, so we're going to jump straight in. Megan, we are hearing lots about the AI bubble at the moment and the AI bubble bursting. What's your view on that? What's happening?
It was just a couple of weeks ago at the end of last year where we saw in 1 week one article that came out and said the AI bubble is about to burst. Another article that came out and said there is no AI bubble. It is all about a perspective right now on whether there is even a bubble or what the bubble's really about. We are seeing a lot of investment in this space, and we do see a bit of the feel that we had back in the late 90s and into the early 2000s where we had the tech bubble back then. That was mostly an investment bubble where we saw a lot of people entering the market in the investment side and betting against it. We saw businesses making those big bets into AI and the tech companies making big bets into each other that this is going to be something really real. And the reality is that businesses need to be able to make that realization for this bubble to not burst. And that's where we're seeing it. So it's more about a hype cycle rather than a bubble is how I think of it, and that we see a lot of potential. Now we need to go out and realize that potential.
Where are organisations going wrong? What can they do around getting greater ROI?
What we see out there is a lot of organizations that do achieve it. There are leaders out there actually doing it, but unfortunately there's a ton of organizations that you could say more doing it rather than actually doing it. And that's where they're investing in it. And this idea is coming home of like, we've bought this technology, it's going to change things. But they're not really investing in their people, in that redesign and reimagine of what their organization and processes look like with these technologies. They think investing in the technologies themselves will be enough. But what we see from research, one research comes from MIT and BCG, says that it's a 20-10-70 split. So 10% into your algorithms, 20% to your technology, and 70% into your people. And what we see even from research from like World Economic Forum and OECD is that the big challenges is really around people and our adoption, because when we see it, the decision to adopt can come from the top, and we can, as a leader, say, yes, we're going to invest in this. But the reality of implementation is that we actually change day-to-day lived behavior in organization. And, you know, the great saying always comes up from Drucker, strategy eats, or culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I love the add-on and technology for lunch, because it's how we enact in our day-to-days that really show whether we're actually adopting these technologies. So businesses are spending a lot of money and time writing great strategies, writing great visions, but they're not spending that time really understanding their culture and moving the business in a way that they're actually using and implementing these emerging technologies in meaningful ways.
We hear a lot about people talking about the impact on people. What sort of things should we sort of consider? Why is that so important?
One of the real things that I see as being important is with what we're seeing in emerging technologies now, it's very different from the other waves of technologies we saw in the past, especially like a lot of consulting in the world that we see right now is based around the ERP implementation. And we moved from an analog world into a digital world. And it was one that where if you didn't change, you didn't get included. If you weren't putting your invoices in the ERP, you didn't exist within your organization. So people were really forced to change that process. So bringing people through that change journey was not easy. A lot of change management and projects didn't go right because of lack of change management, but it was a different type of change management where now we really have to think about changing people's behavior. And that's a real big challenge, because we have to have people that want to actively do this, that are owning this, that are creating that meaning and that shared understanding of what this technology can do. And we see things like something like Copilot, for example. You can deploy those licenses to people, and we can see all sorts of types of uptakes and usage. And it may be great, it may not. People may be hesitant, and that's a real difference, because you can still carry on your career not using it. and you can continue on with using it. So that behavioral change is really different. And so we really need to be thinking about it and thinking about how it impacts our work, which is really different than we had in the past, because that impact now is much more vast, and it's impacting our knowledge work, it's impacting our creativity. It's going to become even more prevalent to really understand what people are doing and how it's impacting their work, to help them through that process, to help them understand how they can take advantage of the technology, and also too to overcome the fear that's coming around it right now. There's obviously a lot of fear. We hear a lot of scary stats in the media, and understandably we've been hearing these stats for more than a decade. You know, it started from 2013, where we hear 47% automation from the Osborne and Frey paper, and the media has run with that one for a long time, even though there was a lot of caveats to that research that said this is more of a role redesign rather than a full replacement, and we still see that now. So having people on board through this process is really important, and also having people on board is where your greatest ideas for innovation in your organization are going to come from. It's not going to come from an out-of-the-box solution, but it's really understanding what your business needs are, and your people understand that the most.
Can you paint a picture of the cultural considerations that organisations need to make?
When we look at these technologies, they're really sold and marketed in a way that it's going to save us time, or it's going to cut costs, it's going to do these wonderful things, it's going to sift your CVs, or it's going to help you do better forecasting. Whatever it is, it's going to do this wonderful thing, but we forget it's going to affect real people in their jobs and in their day-to-day experiences. And that's where, again, going back to the Drucker comment, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you could have the best strategy. We're going to implement this new tool, and we're going to make amazing forecasts, or we're going to implement this new tool, and we're going to improve our onboarding process, or whatever it is. But if we don't really understand how it's going to impact the people doing the work, that's where we're going to get caught up in not being able to make those cultural changes. I have a great example from when I was really first trying to study this and understand it. We were working with a client and implementing an HRIS system, and we were implementing the onboarding process. And part of it was going to automate away the need to kind of email so many different departments for an onboarding process. And there was somebody who was just really resistant to this idea. And we'd never really thought about it at that time. And I recognized what we were saying with the client, that for this organization, one of the most critical things, the first 6 months any new employee was spent doing, was building relationships and knowing who did what and where they were, and building their network within that organization, which is really common in a lot of organizations. Those relationships are critical. And what we were doing was we were automating the important relationships somebody had built. And it wasn't to say that those relationships weren't important and weren't an important aspect of that process, because even though we could automate it, there was still going to be changes, and there's still going to be need for oversight and management, the human in the loop. But nobody had articulated that. Nobody had articulated that real change, especially for that individual, that yes, we were automating that piece of work away, so it should make it easier for that person. But in reality, what she heard was we were automating her value, her relationships away. And we didn't articulate that, no, we're not automating that away. We're just automating sending a bunch of emails out. And what we need you for still is to understand those relationships, understand how the business is changing, and how we're going to be updating those processes alongside that. And having somebody who knows all of that is even more critical now, because if you don't know somebody who knows all the process and can monitor those changes, systems become outdated really quickly, especially in this day and age where they're getting outdated in a few months, 6 months, not 2 or 3 years. So really understanding that real impact, especially with AI and especially on knowledge workers, like as I said before, rolling out Copilot, a lot of people are resistant because it's an impact to them, or they see it as like I was cheating because I used AI. Like there's a lot of really weird feelings about it. And unless we understand what it's really doing, where it's beneficial, and how we can interact with it in a way, unless we push those boundaries and really understand what it's doing to people, we can't really navigate the change. So as business leaders, we really need to be thinking, like, this product is doing forecasting, fantastic. But what does that mean for my analyst? They were doing forecasting before because they were running through a dozen different spreadsheets and spending all their time doing that. Well, now the system's going to do it. But that means they're not going to be shifting through Excel spreadsheets anymore, but they're going to have oversight on this tool and be thinking about different ways that they can work with the algorithm to do different types of forecasts and think about the impact that these different pieces are going to have. So the roles are changing, and we really need to think about that. And that's how we're going to be able to help people understand and navigate that change. And that's why that behavioral aspect is so critical when we think about this, and creating things like psychological safety and understanding people's relationships with this and giving them a place where they can speak up. If we think about a really great example is with radiologists. If we bring in an algorithm that's able to help them with their diagnosis, what happens if they disagree with it? Are they able to have that voice and speak up and be able to have that conversation? Or do they feel like they've been shut down and that they have to listen to the machine? So we really need to be thinking about that and that impact to help our organization change the culture.
That's really great to hear about what organisations need to consider. So, what do organisations need to do to sort of create that effective implementation of AI?
That's a big question. There's a lot of things organizations can do, and it's really thinking about really creating that environment where innovation can thrive. We're currently working on some research around this, and we have 7 dimensions for this, but I'm going to only highlight a few at this time. As I mentioned before, that psychological safety and that ability to have a voice to speak up is so important. Another aspect is allowing people to innovate. So not having this top-down decision from management that says, we're going to implement this tool. Bring people on the journey with you. Give early access and allow people to, again, have that voice to speak up. Is this tool actually going to benefit them? Is this something that they can see using? Because if they've helped you on that journey, they're more likely to use it. We also see things like allowing teams to share their success. That's really important. We are very social creatures, and if we have senior people that are sharing their success and they're doing things, more people are likely to mimic that behavior and to adopt themselves. I always make a challenge, like if a business leader wanted to see everybody in their organization turning on Copilot to record meetings because it's really handy to have those notes, instead of telling people to do it, the best thing to do would be to get on and hit the record button yourself and just start doing it. I bet you within about a month, almost everybody around you will start to do it. So whatever that behavioral change is that you want from the people in your organization, if you live it, not just talk about it, but really live it, you'll help people enact that behavior as well. And it's about talking about it, creating that shared meaning as an organization. What is this technology doing? How is it impacting it? This is how I'm using it, how it's changing me. And then allow people to speak up and say how they feel about it, and also be able to feel confident enough and comfortable enough to pull out the negatives, because it's not going to be perfect, and to be able to have those discussions. And we need to think about change management even more than we have in the past, and make sure organizations are in a place that they can really be successful in helping people understand the real impact that it's having and helping them navigate that change.
What else can business leaders do to encourage people to have more confidence in it?
You can also do things like nudging. So really understanding that impact means that then you can understand who in your organization could be using this technology and sending them nudges and suggestions saying, hey, have you tried this out yet? You can also do things like gamification, turning it into a bit of a game. Who comes up with the better ideas, or who's using it more in their teams? We want to create interventions where people feel that it's fun, that it's becoming a part of their job, it's part of their role, and it's part of the social norms of the organization. So this is the direction of travel. I remember hearing it from one of our graduates, and they said to me, I get all these emails all the time about culture and things that are changing, but I kind of ignore them until I actually see the behavior around me. And that's what it's like for most people.
We've talked a lot about the implementation of AI. How do organisations know that they're having the desired effect?
I think it's when it stops being talking about doing AI, about AI coming, to it just being there every day. So there's a great example that comes from healthcare, and it's about total quality control. There's a lot of organizations that it was still a tick box exercise for them. but it was one team where it just was part of their daily mornings. It was just part of their how they started the day. They didn't even call it total quality management anymore. It was just part of their processes. And that's when it's gone from implementation to truly part of the day-to-day lived experience of people. And that's the same thing with AI. When it's no longer, oh, maybe we could use Copilot for this. It's just what people use, and they don't even talk about it anymore. That's when it's really embedded in the way we do things. And that's what we want to look for with AI. We want to get to a phase where it just happens. The agents are running. We don't need to talk about them anymore. And that's when we know that we're there.
Sadly, we've come to the end of our 15 minutes, so we always ask this question of all of our guests. What's the one thing that you want business leaders to take away?
If I was to recommend anything to a business leader, the foundation of it all is to understand what the technology is really doing. Not how the coding works or even all the algorithms that are being used, but what data is going in, what is it doing to the data, and what output is coming out. Not that it's making a forecast, but what is it actually doing, and what does that mean to your business processes? What does that mean to your people? The more that business leaders can really understand that one piece, the more real their messages will be, the more that they'll be able to help the change process, and the more informed their investment into the technology will be, because they'll know what their business actually needs, not what marketing sounds good.
Well, that's our 15 minutes up. Our thanks to Megan for joining us. Don't forget, you'll find more episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time for the Insight in 15.